If I introduce rent control today, does it increase housing supply by 1 tomorrow? Hard rent controls. So that's similar to what Paul was suggesting, which is 0% freeze is huge for this. 0% freeze is huge for this.
If you look back between, say, 2008 through to 2022, most landlords did not put up rents, especially in the base buy-to-let market. And then because of things like interest rate rises, increase in taxation, council tax, landlords were forced into the position to raise rents.
Large institutional landlords and/or private landlords who are willing to invest in the market and stable market rents. A rent stabilization linked to that makes perfect sense.
Hi everyone, just before we get going with today's podcast, just a quick announcement that our book is now live on Amazon. If you go and search for Financial Freedom at BDRR, you'll find a book that describes the mindset, strategies, systems that we've put together to deliver over 50 projects in 5 years. We launched it in 2025 and it went to #1 in 3 separate categories on the bestseller list. So hopefully you'll find some real good value out of it. And just one more time, Financial Freedom, BDRR on Amazon.
Yeah, the BDR evolution is changing the game.
Well, that's the full title. If you want to be picky. Yeah, go and find it.
Hi folks, and welcome back to the Financial Freedom Podcast. Today on the show is going to be one of our technical episodes, and we're going to be discussing all things rent control. It's hitting the news recently. MPs coming out saying they're either in favour for it or against it. So what we're going to be looking for today is, as always, consequences, opportunities, and everything in between. So as always with our technical episodes, I am joined by my co-host Tim Witt. Hello, Tim.
Hello, thanks for having me. Great to be here again.
Yeah, should we address the elephant in the room?
What's that?
We wearing the same colour t-shirt. We've gone full Stephen Bartlett.
Just blacks. As long as you wear a black shirt, you're allowed in, basically.
Yeah. Henry Ford. You can have any colour as long as it's black. Full Stephen Bartlett. Diary CEO always wears a black t-shirt. So good stuff. Good to see you as well. Had a holiday.
You had a nice couple of weeks.
Turkey. Got come back fatter and stronger. So all I did was eat and train. Yeah, it was good.
Nice.
Right. So rent control. So this is hitting the news at the moment. Landlords are the enemy again. Even though they've just brought out the Renters' Rights Act, which has actually caused, as we estimated, loads of issues with people getting Section 21s, landlords panicking, and now rents are going up or have gone up. A knee-jerk reaction to the Renters' Rights Act, and now rent control is in the headlines.
But also with the Renters' Rights rules that came in, rent controls came in as part of that anyway. Technically, they changed the fixed term contracts to rolling, as we know.
Yeah.
And you can only review or raise the rents once a year. And I think it's after 12 months initially. You can't do it until it's 12 months.
You give your notice, 2 months notice. Yeah, 2 months notice. That rent's going to change, and then it can't implement until after 12 months. So
that's right. Yeah.
If you are a canny landlord, then you'd be doing it on month 10.
Yeah.
To give the notice to then come into month 12.
Yeah.
And if you're a canny tenant, if you don't think it's fair, you would challenge that through the new ombudsman.
And it's supposed to be market tested or market rate, doesn't it? In essence. So actually, those rules, I think they're reasonable. I don't think they're too bad.
I think they're reasonable. I just don't agree. I think there's actually I don't think it's done what it intended.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure what market rents are.
Yes.
Because I run an agency. If I wanted to determine market rents and I want to put rents up, I'll put 5 adverts out. Yeah. I've got 5 evidences, right? And I think that is one of the loophole scenarios where they haven't done the right thing.
Yeah.
Which I think some kind of look at this is the right thing to do. But at the same time, rent control in its purest form doesn't necessarily work. So should we discuss what is rent control? First and foremost.
Yes.
So what is, in your eyes, what is rent control?
So it's putting a rule in place that stops a landlord, say rising the rents, or it puts like a freeze on the rents maybe, or completely controls it from a certain perspective. So it could be a freeze temporarily or permanently, or it could be a control like the rent can only go up in line with, say, CPI, which is a consumer price index for inflation or something like that. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, and I would put it into 2 categories. I put it into rent control and rent stabilization. One of those, I think, is absolutely the right thing to do, and one of those is not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So if you look at some of the rent controls, like I know you quoted an MP recently, actually one of your most interacted with ever posts, by the way, and then I put my hand in there and went, we don't want to do negative posts. But it was a really good one actually, because it was an MP who put it out there saying I want a 0% rent freeze.
Yeah, so it's Paul Davies, MP.
Yeah.
I think he's the MP of Colne Valley, which I believe is in Yorkshire or something like that. Anyway, so I got prompted by it because I saw his social media post that basically said rents have gone up 8% in the last couple of years. We had to put rent freezes in place. He did say temporarily, but we don't know how long that meant. So basically, I just responded to his message with a post, and I also wrote a letter to my local MP explaining more so what it actually meant from a landlord and tenants perspective, and like a lot of the unintended consequences, and also the challenges that landlords have faced the last couple of years, which has resulted in higher rents and at the same time possibly less profits or cash flow for landlords as well, by the way. So,
and I think there's some good examples, isn't there, of where this has worked and where this hasn't worked. But let's just, at a basic level, rent control is designed to protect existing tenants, number one.
Yeah.
That's the primary position. Prevent sudden rent shocks if anything happens, like a renters' riot. May as well be the Renters' Riot Act. The Renters' Rights Act.
Yeah.
Improve some security. People want security. And the Renters' Rights Act is tried to do that as well. And also just sort of like reduce sort of displacement, provide long-term stabilization of movement of people and so on and so forth, and settlement in the area. So politically, it's a positive, isn't it? If it's political only looking at it.
Yeah, well, that's obviously why he put that, Paul Davies put that post out, and that's why, Labour, some MPs have been talking about bringing it in for obviously political reasons and, to get voters on board and things like that.
Yeah, so, and ultimately, where you have a very strong inflationary environment, if rents are raising really quickly and in advance of inflation, then it's faster than the living wages are rising. That is a problem because it becomes a higher percentage of affordability for individual people.
Yeah.
And that's when you see significant problems happening in unaffordable living, too high a percentage of the income going on rent, which means they can't afford other things. Reduces, liquidity in the market. That then has a knock-on effect to affordability for other things. It then reduces business, reduces jobs, reduces the amount of people can afford for rents, and then you see more voids and you see more rents not being paid and stuff like that. And it's a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah, I agree. That's a challenge. 100% that's a challenge. I'll also flip it around to you and go, one of the main reasons why rents are what they are is why?
Well, it's it's a lack of housing.
Well, that's one thing.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is the reason rents are what they are is because that's what the market can afford to pay.
Yes.
And what tenants can pay. And obviously we run an agency, and every property that we let, we do an affordability check to make sure they can pay the rent. Obviously not everyone does that. And people might be renting properties that they probably can't afford, but the ones that we do can afford it. We know that they can afford it. So whether they're not paying the rent, sometimes...
Well, they can afford it while they're employed.
Yeah. Sometimes there's obviously challenges like unemployment or loss of work and stuff like that. That becomes a different circumstance as well.
Yeah. So what we need to do as part of this is just differentiate a little bit.
Yeah.
So hard rent controls. So that's similar to what Paul was suggesting, which is 0% freeze. That's it. No more. That's a hard rent control, fixed or heavily capped rent, limited ability to increase rent, and strong tenant protections.
Yeah.
So the benefit is existing tenants, and in my opinion, only existing tenants.
Yes, and that all of the research I've done. So they brought in Scotland, say fairly recently, they've had 2 periods of rent controls in the last few years, and that is who it protected. So 100% get that. The ones that are living in the property at the time, that remain in those properties, that's who it protects. And that's probably the only real benefit that happened as a result of those freezes. Yeah,
and people start adding their children to the tenancy, and then the tenancy gets passed through generation and that kind of thing. So that is the Scotland example. I've got some other examples actually, which we'll talk about in a minute. We'll go on to examples.
Yeah, sounds good.
So that is a hard approach. Now, the risk is huge for this, because if you are in an environment which is led by the state, which is what that would be, you are not going to get investment from the private sector.
Yeah.
Because they are fearful that the state-controlled investment. So the majority of the private rented sector is funded by the private rented sector.
Yeah.
Right. So that wipes out future investment in that space. Yes. Now, there's an argument to say, well, the state should control the housing. Well, have you seen state-controlled housing? It's not necessarily a good thing, right?
No, well, actually, generally, obviously, we'll talk about examples in a bit, but the housing quality can drop off quite quickly because of that reduced investment or lack of investment, and also the supply as well.
So what will happen if it's a hard rent control is landlords will leave, definitely, because we've seen it only with the Renters' Rights Act, and we haven't really seen a massive impact so far. On tenancies day to day. And we've seen a few people who've taken advantage of the 2 months notice rule, but I like 2 months notice rather than 1. So I'm not that fussed,
Yeah.
Reduced investment. That's the big one.
Yeah.
For me, is we're trying to meet housing targets, and you're going to restrict something which is really significant contributor to the housing.
Yeah, the major
space,
contributor
to the housing space. Well, at the moment it is certainly because new builds very, very hard, and then lower housing supply. Lower housing supply is what's going to happen. And the question I would always put back is, if I introduce rent control today, does it increase housing supply by 1 tomorrow? Doesn't.
No.
So why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Right? So why are we doing it? Like, why are we talking about a hard rent control at all? Whereas rent stabilization, which is a softer approach, I get it. But basically what you do is you mentioned CPI. So let's see CPI as an example. So CPI, I think it's like 2.8% average or something like that over the last.
Currently it's 2.8%.
But I think that's the average over like 15 years. Obviously, during COVID and after COVID, it was just through the roof, wasn't it? But
well, the government target is always, I believe, I think 2 to 3%.
2%, yeah. So, but our actual average, I think, is around 2.8 over a 10 to 15 year period or something like that, right? So what that means is the CPI is the consumer price index. Consumer goods are going up by that amount per annum. So a rent stabilization linked to that makes perfect sense, because why wouldn't you do that? 2 point whatever the percentage is, and or up to 2% above, as an example. Because if you think about it, consumer products don't get locked in for a year. So if I'm buying, I always use Freddos. So if my Freddo, which is now 30p, by the way, I saw in the shop the other day, 30p for Freddo. I was like, it's insane. It used to be 25p for a Mars bar. It's now 30p for a Freddo, right? So, so if I my Freddo today is 30p, and then it goes up by 3%, which is a penny, let's say. So it goes up to 31p. Then that I can change that price today. And then in 6 months I can put it up by another 3% to 32p. Whereas you can't do that with rent control. So it would be CPI plus 2% to manage the yearly inflation maximum. Also tested against the market rate. And not only one way, by the way. It should never only be one way. That's one of the key problems that's been with CPI linked commercial leases. And they're addressing that at the moment, which is it's only ever been one way. It's only ever been up. Whereas if it goes down, well, why wouldn't it go down? If you can't be both ways, right? It's got to be up. Now, what that means is more predictable, right? It's more predictable. So if you're going to bring something in, it's more predictable for tenants, because if they say, oh, well, CPI has gone up by 3%, my wages have gone up by 3%, my rent's gone up by 3%, I get it. Everything's gone up by 3%. Whereas a new tenancy can still reset the market. You can still test the market. You still got your ability to sell.
Yeah, my challenge on that one is, and I understand the stabilization, but CPI does not include things like, say, interest rate rises. It doesn't include like increases in energy costs and things like that.
It doesn't. It doesn't, but because it's the consumer price index, not the retail price index. But it does link, because if I have to produce something, then my energy price and my interest rate are locked against that.
Agreed. The interest rate rise and energy costs will affect the consumer price, because all those things are needed for the production of that. But some of it can happen instantaneously. So interest rates can go up quickly, throughout the year. Whereas the knock-on effect from those interest rates for the consumer price might be delayed. So the landlord could have the effect of the cost, quite quickly, especially with the mortgage price.
So it's certainly on a variable, right?
Yeah.
You'd be struggling. But if you're on a fixed rate for 5 years, and your consumer price index has been 3% per annum,
fixed rate will depend on when the term ends, won't it? Because if the term's about to end and that happens, that's a shockwave. And you could be losing money from that.
Let's say you haven't but here is in the problem as well, which is if you've not been putting your rents up, and a lot of landlords hadn't been putting their rents up, right? Because they were happy with the tenant. You didn't necessarily have a mortgage or anything like that, so they weren't locked into that. So that in a way is a rent stabilization in itself, because they're happy with the tenant, the tenant's paying. But the problem comes is if you do that and you are then locked in, and then after 5 years you then say, oh, well, I can only increase it next year by 2.8%. And his interest rate's gone up by 4% or whatever since his previous one that he had at 0.95 or whatever it was back in the day, right? So all of a sudden you're right, he's going to lose money because he can't keep up with the market. So, but again, it's more predictable if you know that that's the scenario. So you can actually predict it. So if you then don't do your annual rate increases, then that's up to you at the end of the day, and that's the risk you take, right? It does provide some tenant protections as well, because if the tenant knows in advance this is what's going to happen, then you can predict it better. So I think that is a fair balance. And so if you're going to do something with rent stabilization, I don't actually agree that it's the right thing to do, because I like free market economy anyway. but it's on the table. Something's going to be tested, I think, at some point, because as soon as the politicians start talking about it, something's going to be brought in. And if they go hard rent control, massive problem for everybody. I think rent stabilization is a much fairer balance and gives us a bit more of an opportunity to actually do stuff. Because if you're going to then predict what the rents are going to be in 4 years at the end of a development project, for example, in 2 years, you can assess it.
Just going back to your point before about landlords and rent. So if you look back between, say, 2008 through to 2022, most landlords did not put up rents, especially in the base buy-to-let market, because they didn't need
HMO
to.
room, £500, 10 years.
Yeah, or your simple, terrace property, because, they might have had good tenants, like you said, that are there for a long time. Also, interest rates weren't shifting much. Council rates weren't shifting that much. Your landlord kept it the same because they were just happy with that little bit of cash flow every month.
Yeah.
They liked the stability of a good tenant looking after the property. They didn't want the costs of the reletting fees and void periods and anything like that.
Yeah.
So pretty much they kept the rents the same. So it shows that even though the market could have demanded more, they weren't doing it.
Yeah.
And then because of things like interest rate rises, increase in taxation, council tax as well, utility costs and all those sort of things, landlords were forced into the position to raise rents. So
if they would charge bills, of course.
Yeah.
Or mortgages if they've got an interest rate.
Yes.
Section 24 tax.
Don't forget. So HMO rooms, yes, if you're bills included, you're forced to put it up because of those increasing costs. Same with interest rates. But even a buy-to-let, don't forget, you do have void periods as well that you might have to cover the utility costs and the council tax in between. So
that is true.
Even if the tenant is paying it, of a changeover period, those costs can affect you as well. So it does affect across the board.
Yeah. And that's a good point as well, which is having a stand down rate would make sense for council tax. Having a stand down rate for utilities would make sense.
Yes, absolutely.
It wouldn't eliminate, but you wouldn't be paying full rate, as an example. In the same way that you get an extra 100% council tax if your property's been empty for 12 months. I agree with that as well, by the way.
Yeah.
We don't want empty properties. You have to do something with it, sell it or renovate it if it's not livable, whatever. I think that's correct. But I do think the rent stabilization, because if you're going to continue to grow the investment in the sector, then you need to know as an investor that you are not completely restricted. And if you are completely restricted with a hard rent cap, which is your MP Paul guy, 0%, investment stops overnight.
Yeah.
Because the fear factor there is, I can't risk this being extended another 12 months.
Right, here's one for you. Rent stabilization then. So if you're looking at a CPI raise, then there could also be an application to go outside of CPI for certain reasons. So let's say interest rates, example. Yeah. You're on a 3% rate or whatever for 5 years. The interest rates have gone up, you're moving on to 6%. So you're paying double the mortgage of what you were before. You have to put the rent up basically, otherwise you might be losing money on that property. So the 3% is not going to cover it. You'd probably have to sell the property, or you'd be losing money, and it wouldn't be a viable option to keep. So on that point, you basically apply and say, look, normal is 3% because of inflation. However, because of the interest rate rises, I apply to go higher, such and such, or something like that. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think it would. And I think that comes down to a common sense approach to how you're financing your property as well. Yeah. Which is, if you're taking a 5-year fixed rate and don't put your rents up over 5 years, then you've not taken advantage of the yearly increase. So then again, you're going to put yourself into a big problem position. If you take the risk on a variable rate, is that then fair to then put that risk back onto the tenant if you have taken that risk and a problem happens? Because you may have had a benefit for a period of time. I know during there was a 10-year period at 0.5% where base rate, where people with property who taking variable rates were absolutely, raking it in.
You do raise a good point there in a way, because let's say the rent was well below market rate for years because it didn't need to go up.
Yeah.
Let's take an example. It's like £700 a month for this terrace property. And then after 5 years, that low interest ended and the landlord hadn't raised it in 5 years and the tenant's been paying 700 for those 5 years leading up to it. Then suddenly they go, oh, geez, the market rate's actually $1,200 a month or something like that. And I need to raise it because my mortgage is doubling. The shockwave for that tenant is extreme, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
It's £500.
And unfairly so as well.
Yeah.
But the problem is that should have been done incrementally.
Yeah, whereas exactly. So if the landlord, it started at 700 and they were putting it up, I don't know, let's say £25, £50 a year for that period. They got to the 5-year period and it went from 700 to 1,000 over that 5 years or something like that. And then they go, oh, I could go up to 1,200 or I could keep it at 1,000.
Yeah, and
let's agree it at 1,100. The shockwave to that tenant isn't too bad.
The problem with the market is we were so long at this lower base rate that nobody was doing it. Like I rented for 10 years Never once had a rent rise. Never once while I was renting a property. You know, in that 10-year period.
Right. I want to hear from your examples of, say, other countries or other locations where rent controls have come in.
Yeah, sure.
And what happened? What were the results?
Well, actually, what we'll do is I'll discuss the individual cases.
Yeah.
And then I've got a bit of a summary as to why those things have worked or haven't worked anyway.
Yeah.
So Stockholm. I'm going to talk about Stockholm for a minute.
Yeah. Sweden.
Sweden had a very hard rent cap, more towards the hard rent than the stabilization. Rent, and official rents remain. So then officially, rents have remained affordable.
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem, the waiting lists for new properties now exceed 10 years.
Yeah, it's just insane.
Waiting lists for a new rental property in Stockholm, right? Black markets have subletting have emerged because you have to live somewhere. So therefore, people who are in this low rental affordable thing have then subletted a room for the same amount.
Yeah, so people that are on
they're paying.
People that are on the waiting list or whatever, they sublet to them at a high rate. Yeah, whatever.
I'll just rent your room off you. They're paying the rent, and therefore that person is living for free.
Potentially cash in hand or something like that.
New entrants are just not finding accommodation. You know, it's really difficult. So, you know, the service accommodation space is huge, and affordable housing that nobody can access in that area is therefore not affordable.
Yeah, you can't. If you've got to wait 10 years, it's completely irrelevant, isn't it?
I remember. I'm going to then pick on New York because I remember the Friends quote when they were moving out of the flat at the very end of series 10. And I think it was Chandler, Matt, God bless him. He's not with us anymore, but he said, it's been such a great flat. And because of rent control, it's been an absolute steal. And I remembered that. What is that? What is rent? That was the first time I ever heard the phrase rent control. I had to Google it. What's rent control? So the benefit, existing tenants received significant protection and housing costs remained low for those protected tenants. The problem, buildings, deterioration. Landlords can't afford to fix stuff because the cost of fixing
the quality drops off, doesn't it? So you're not keeping it, you're not maintaining it that well potentially, or you're not doing the new investment to get it up to bring in new high standard properties because the cost just drops off a cliff.
Tenants have stayed for decades, not years.
Yeah.
Right. And it's trapped mobility because they cannot afford to leave.
Right. Yeah. So what you're saying is the rent, because it's capped at where they are. Let's say that use example was $700 a month, but the next to move somewhere is $1,300. They can't do it, can they?
No, because so there was an example which was somebody's still paying something like $750 a month rent in a flat in New York. Yeah. Close to, is it Wall Street? New York, 'cause it's close to Wall Street.
Yeah, that's the southern end of the island.
The equivalent flat, $4,000 a month.
Mental, isn't it?
Yeah. So what are they supposed to do?
Also, aspirations. Like we're the Financial Freedom Podcast. We like aspirations of people trying to better themselves and better their lives. Mm-hmm. If you've got this really low rent control, and you're like, "Oh, geez, I'm paying this amount." Like, why would you aspire to do anything else?
Commercial property up, residential property down, investment.
Yeah.
You know. So I mean, it's good and bad. Yeah, it's good and bad, right? So hotels explode. Yeah. Service accommodation explodes. Yeah. Residential property dies. It's more luck than need, housing allocation at that point. But for the first couple of years, I'm sure it was great. Yeah. You know. So they're obviously the ones with the hard rent controls. Scotland was the most recent example. It was an emergency rent cap.
Yeah. So they did two like yearly ones, didn't they, in the last few years, I believe.
And the positive outcome of that was the existing tenants became protected. Yep. Short-term affordability. The concern was that at that point, I remember it was only like, it was even the time that we've been doing this property, landlords just went, nope, see ya. And the supply just dropped off the face. So that short-term affordability, reduced investment, supply concerns are still there. And they're now looking at it to say, was that the right thing to do, with the dial pointed towards no? You know, if they're looking at it, was it the right thing to do? It's because they're looking for a reason to find why it was. They're not going to find one, if I'm honest, because it did correct things in the short term, but honestly, it really created a
Scotland's
problem.
a good example as well, because the other thing that happened in Scotland is landlords, again, when they had new properties on the market or a tenant move, they just put the rents as high as they possibly could. Yeah. So I looked at the stats in those years, and I think the actual rental growth, weirdly, in Scotland was the highest in the UK during those yearly periods, because landlords that probably wouldn't have touched it have suddenly gone, oh, I really need to put it up in case something happens. I need to protect myself because I don't have the option, which actually the control put rents higher across the board on average.
And that's the example everywhere, really, which is when you meet your new rental,
it's a complete unintended consequence.
Geneva's the same, you know, that kind of stuff. So, so the core debate, rent control, not stabilization.
Yeah.
Does rent control create any new homes?
No.
No. Does rent
it
control...
reduces it.
Yeah. Does rent control help existing tenants?
Yes.
Yes. Does rent control
temporarily
solve housing shortages?
No.
No, it doesn't. So the history of it says that actually that's not going to work over a medium term, because if you're only helping existing tenants, you're not helping new tenants. You're not creating that market mobility. Right. Stabilization then. Let's look at that. So Germany, the Germans, they've done really well with this, right? I didn't even realize this was a thing, right? So strong tenant protections, first and foremost. That's what they brought in. Similar to the Renters' Rights Act,
which is what we've got now.
Which is what we've got.
Yeah.
They've created a long-term renting culture, large institutional landlords and/or private landlords who are willing to invest in the market, and stable market rents. Perfect. What a good balance. But underlying that, what do you think is the fundamental thing that's made this work? Taken away. What do you think it is?
Well, you just tell me, because you've got
housing supply.
So they've got enough housing.
They've gone big on build. They've gone big on repurposing.
Right.
And they've gone big on new housing.
Perfect, because that will lead on solutions when we talk about those.
Yeah, exactly. So they've stabilized it. They've still increased investment.
Yeah.
They've allowed institutional lending. They've encouraged private investment in the space. They've linked it to create some. You're still going to get your margins, but your margins aren't going to be. Oh, I'm going to put my rent up £500 this year just because I can.
Yeah.
It's going to be controlled to a degree. It's going to be stabilized, so everybody wins.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're also going to build loads of new homes.
It sounds like a well thought out process.
Yeah, it does.
And this might lead to a wider political debate, but obviously, because Germany don't have the 4-year election scheme, do they? Had they planned this out over a longer period or something like that?
I don't
that
know.
might be worth looking into.
Yeah. I imagine it's a Merkel thing.
Yeah, because it seems like in the UK, there's very much ad hoc short-term thinking and not thinking about the overall picture. So it's like, oh, we'll just freeze rents. But at the same time, we're trying to build 300,000 houses a year. Yep. They completely affect each other without the thought pattern behind it, I think. The long-term thought pattern, I should say.
One of the state examples, ironically, is Vienna.
Right, okay. Tell me about this one.
So it's got affordable housing and stable communities with strong tenant protections, but the city owns about 60% of the property. But they're building, and they're not building badly. They're building good quality homes.
Yeah.
Not what the UK do, which is matchbox houses for social housing. They're building good quality, long-term, sustainable homes.
Yeah.
So they're committing to it. Do you know what I mean? And that's a good example.
Yeah.
Singapore, example, building loads of homes.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, where it's working for rent stabilization
is supply increase.
Is supply increase.
So what I'd want to know from the supply increase is how much is government supply or government backed. Yes. Because I think that's obviously a big thing we're missing in the UK. And my guess is in those cities, there's a lot of government-backed or government-built...
government partnerships.
Government partnerships for affordable housing. That's where it needs to be, because the government's just putting it on the private sector and then just blaming them when it doesn't work. But the private sector are like, well, I can't build something and lose money. Type thing. So, it'd be good to look at those examples in more detail.
Yeah. So San Francisco is one of the bad examples. And they actually did a study on why it was so bad. So Stanford University studied it. So it was a rent control, not rent stabilization.
So they had a big drop off in supply, didn't they, for rental supply?
So basically, existing tenants benefited in the short term.
Yeah.
The response was landlords sold properties, stopped converted units, reduced overall rental supply.
Investment,
The result was an overall rental supply fall and market rent increased on average year on year.
Sounds very similar to the Scotland scenario, doesn't it?
Yeah. So there is something that you can do. I think the summary really is finding a nice balance is the way to do it. But politically, we seem to be living in a world of extremes right now, which is we have the real far left and the real far right.
Yeah.
Which is the Green Party on the left and Restore on the right. They are, whichever it is. They might not be quite as far right as previous, 1940s era, but they are. And the Greens are open borders, landlords should never make a profit, really far left on the topic. Restore, I want to get rid of 2 million people that'll solve my housing crisis, right? So that's which, would, but at the same time, that's harsh. You know,
Do we think a lot of this comes down to, say, social media and algorithms? Because in our lifetime, politically, it was more central, wasn't it?
yeah.
Like until the last few years. Because I think if you're a little bit left on our social media, you get fed the left stuff, don't you? You'll be getting the stuff from the Greens, Labour parties, things like that. And then it'll probably, the more you engage in it, the more you probably get more extreme left. And then similarly, if you're slightly on the right, if you're fairly centre but right, you get more stuff far right. So like, I would say I'm central, but slightly towards the right. But I get, like you'd mentioned Restore before. I've been getting on my like social media feeds a lot of Restore stuff.
Yeah, he's all over it. Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, that's much further right than I am.
It's because you got blonde hair, blue eyes, mate.
That's it. And I'm like, but I'm getting fed that stuff because I've just, I'm a little bit right, a little bit central right.
Yeah. I'm centre right. You know, I'm centre right. I don't think getting rid of families that are already here is the right thing to do if they really genuinely have fleed for a reason. You know.
I
don't think that's the thing to do. But but at the same time, I do think that some of the things need to be controlled.
Right.
So what is the best balance?
So I think your point before about like improving supply is a big factor of this that completely gets. Well, I don't know if it gets overlooked, but it doesn't. The problems haven't been solved. So, if we talk about increasing supply and doing good quality supply and supporting that investment, whether it's government backed or private, that's going to help this space. But also the stuff that actually is affordable gets slammed quite a lot politically. So if you think, we do a lot of HMO rooms, which are for people in a transitional period of their life or, they're a young age. That's affordable housing. Because you can rent a room, you've got an ensuite, you've got shared facilities, and potentially got bills included. So, support those sort of things as well. Or, flat conversions as an example that are, they're affordable versions of housing. Support those sort of things as well. Help the private sector reduce the cost, because if you help reduce their costs, they don't have to put the rents up. They're literally just like, right, I'm happy making £200 a month for this property. That's fine. I won't put the rents up. I've got a good long-term tenant, or they might put it up incrementally, like we talked about. That's absolutely fine, and that's stable for the tenant. To have these, the costs that get affected that hit landlords instantaneously. They kind of either have to sell or they are forced to put the rents up.
Yeah, exactly. What we know is that too little control and too little regulation is bad, because there's like
there's
not just that. There's not everyone's like me and you wanting to provide safe, affordable accommodation.
Yes, very true.
Some people just want to make money. And they don't care about it.
It can get abused.
Right? So it can get abused. So tenant insecurity, rent shocks, political instability, that kind of stuff. Too much regulation on the other side of things. So if we're going left to right here, right to left here. So landlord exits, reduce supply, lower investment.
It's very, very simple.
So I don't understand why we're not looking at the sweet spot in the middle. Centre left or centre right would work. Which is, and again, if you look at the commercial market, the big shock to the commercial market was the death of the high street. That wasn't anything to do with the rents. It wasn't anything to do with that kind of thing. But even though it's become more expensive to because of inflation as a whole, but most of the existing businesses,
I would say, I don't like the term death of the high street. I think it's transition of the high street, isn't it? Because there's certain businesses that, because of technology, say, they can be done online, as an example. So your clothing stores, those sort of things that were traditionally on the high streets, they can be done online, so they don't work that well. But then you've got other things like bars and restaurants or whatever. So, they still work well on the high street and all those sort of things. So a bit of a transition, but
which are directly affected by affordability, by the way.
100%,
But over a long-term period, commercial rents have been linked to CPI. Traditionally. So and it's done the sector really, really well. So I think the likely sweet spot, rent stabilization, CPI linked plus 2% maybe to, like you said, deal with if there's an extra shock or something like that.
An exemption because of a shock wave or something like that. Or
a maximum increase. 10%, maybe 5%, depending on where you are in the world. Market rents on new tenancies, that's a competitive thing. You want that to happen. Exemptions for major refurbs, exemptions for new housing, that kind of stuff. Those are all things which work really, really well, in my opinion. And not that we think our opinion is the only one, because I'm sure somebody say, oh no, none of that works. But at the same time, we want to make sure that people are investing the money into the private sector and the general housing sector privately. Because a lot of the wealth sits in the private space, it doesn't necessarily sit with the state. At the moment, the state can't afford to pay their bills because their welfare budget is more than the tax that they take, right? So, which is in modern income tax, which is incredible.
Yeah.
You know, which is an incredible thing.
The other thing, weirdly, I'm going to touch on here is, did you ever think that house prices going up is actually better for everyone? Because, you know, we talked about it before. So house building example to increase supply. If the costs of everything is going up, but the house prices aren't, it just halts building, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a sweet. Those are the market trends and forecasts. All right. So it's almost like a wave. And at the moment, we're at the sort of like peak of the costs wave, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Whereas we're at the bottom of the house price, because we're even seeing some decline in some locations. So costs are up, prices are the same or down, or in real terms against inflation are definitely down nationally. And therefore, if you think about the rule of thumb of the cost of the property, the project being a third, the cost of the build being a third, and then the profit being a third, it's more like 20,
that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's more like 20, 60, 20 if you're lucky at the moment, with 60% being the cost of the build program, which is never going to be sustainable.
But there's certain things that can be done to support that. So if you took like, let's just take building materials as an example. If the inflation of that is quite high and that's effective construction taking place and development, there's a simple thing the government to do is just remove the VAT or reduce the VAT on that amount. And then that reduces by 20%, 15%, 10% or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's things like that can be done very, very easily.
The mad thing is, even by reducing that, doesn't mean that they won't receive more VAT.
No, because
more's being done.
Yeah. So if you reduce the VAT from 20 to 10, but that encourages a lot more investment.
Yeah. If you double the investment,
collect more tax.
If you halve the tax and over double the investment, you're going to make more.
Exactly.
Tax, right.
And help the wider economy in other ways.
Yeah.
You know, jobs, wage increase, blah, 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 all those other things. So there's lots of benefits.
There are other things as well, which is the cost of the things that they bring in, like the bayonet gates, the things like acoustic treatments and things like that. It's like if you provide grants for those things, your grants are going to be paid back in the taxes that you make through the development. So you know, just help people to do that. Because if you look at the town centre, what's the best way to revitalise our town centre? Get people into the town centre. How do you get people into the town centre? Let them live there.
Yeah.
You know,
convert the empty buildings to
you got all these
residential properties.
You got loads of like high rise, like 3, 4, 5-story buildings that have got new building regs where you have to put new fire escapes in really expensively to do. All right, that's fine. You pay for the fire escapes.
Yeah.
You know, provide a grant.
Yeah.
You know, something like that to help with that.
Yeah. So the other thing in the town centre as well is a lot of listed buildings, which become untouched.
Yeah.
And the listings are too complex.
Yeah.
So as a project manager, we look at them and you go, right, what's the scope for this? And what is it? And you lose control of it because influenced by someone else.
Yeah.
I get protecting a facade.
Yeah, 100%.
And a streetscape.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So like, right, we protect, if you literally had a listing where it's like, the windows are listed, we protect them, the facade is listed, you can't paint it pink or whatever. You need to keep it in keeping and upgrade it. Completely get that. But then the internal elements,
it's mad, isn't it?
It's mad.
And
they're protected.
I mean, it's a whole different topic, listings, but it goes back to when the architectural boys club used to be. You can't join our club unless you've done an architectural development that's listed.
Yeah.
Right, that used to be a thing.
Yeah.
So everybody was trying to get listings at the time.
Yeah.
So we've got listings for stuff that should never be listed. Like our friend John, who couldn't lower his roof to put his 2 rooms in the top because the building was listed. They'd never inspected the internals. He wasn't allowed to lower his roof by a foot internal.
Yeah.
No change to the external. Wasn't allowed. And I'm just like, this is mental. You know, this is what a crazy world that we're living in.
The listings need to be looked at majorly because I looked at a big building in Altrincham, not far from me. Beautiful location.
Yeah.
The upper floors, you keep the ground floors commercial, really good commercial space. The upper floors convert really well to residential.
Yeah.
And I looked at this property and the plan permission for the listing requirements, and I said, "Whoa,
mad."
Way too much risk.
Yeah. Anyway,
way too much lack of control of the budget. But that could help.
Probably moving away from rent control there. Yeah. So I think there is a sweet spot. I think if you get that stabilization implementation rather than a rent control, then what we're going to see is benefits for tenant security and predictability. Predictability is the one for me. If you know your rent's going up by the CPI every year, up to 2% above, then you know what you're going to be able to afford.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. For investors, it creates confidence because you know if you put it in that you're not going to be locked. And at the moment, the confidence is low because it's unknown what's going to happen, which is worse to a degree. It'd be better having a rent control or not, or them coming out saying we're never going to do this or we are going to do this, rather than this are they, aren't they kind of scenario. It's like, right, do something or don't do something.
Yeah.
And because we can long-term plan. And for the government, you get the political stability and the continued investment. That, to me, all adds up to a good environment. It's more professional. It's commercial. Everybody understands it. Black and white. Rent control hard. It's too left.
Yeah.
No rent control. No Renters' Rights Act, which is what people are saying they're going to tear up. It's too right. It's too right.
Yeah, it's,
You know, so this middle ground, I think if you are a professional in this space, if you can find that middle ground and it works for you, this is really exciting. That would be really exciting. I think that's a benefit, not a curse.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
Any
Sounds
thoughts?
good.
Any final thoughts?
It's just supporting the people that want to support the sector.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So, you know, whatever incentives are there to help, you know, get these empty buildings converted, get the new buildings built, you know, to increase that supply and then stabilize, you know, the rents and control and stuff like that. It's just going to benefit everyone.
Yeah, exactly. If you help people to convert, if you help people to build, you're going to increase supply.
Yeah.
If you do that with rent stabilization, so it's predictable, you're going to increase supply.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah. So in my opinion, the government should be spending more time creating more homes and looking for the opportunities to do that, and less time thinking about hard stop rent controls like your MP that you rightly called out and he didn't respond to your message, even though you got like stupid amount of reviews.
I haven't got a response back from my local MP either yet, which is a bit disappointing. So hopefully that comes through.
Yeah. So let's all write to our MPs.
Mike Keane, isn't it, in my local MP in Sale where I am. Please get back to me if you're listening to this podcast.
You probably won't. Yeah. All right, good stuff. I assume that people watching this would have said no, exactly, straight off the bat. No, don't ever do anything. Leave us to a free market economy. And actually, we're going.
We're trying to be fairly central, aren't we?
Yeah, to be balanced.
Best,
some stabilization would be good.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Right. So anyone listening to this, enjoy this podcast, please like and subscribe and put the notifications on. And looking forward to seeing you on the next one.
Yeah. So that's it from today. And thank you very much for joining us. And we will catch you on the next one. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Thank you once again for joining us on the Financial Freedom Podcast, sponsored by us at Property Portfolio Building. If you want to get in touch with us about today's podcast or any of the learning topics that we've gone through today, you can email us at podcast@invest-prop.co.uk or get in touch with us with whichever your social media platform of choice is. If you think you would add value to us as a guest on this podcast, you can please get in touch and let us know what you would be able to talk to us about. Other than that, we wish you well on your financial freedom journeys. And once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.